Hello there. I am Scorched Scales. And, a week ago, I read The Flames of Hope, the conclusion to Arc 3, and the final mainline Wings of Fire book. Currently! This series will continue until the end of time. Before going into the book, I will say I have heard, a lot of negative things about this book. I've heard a lot of people say that, ooh, this is the worst Wings of Fire book. Ooh, this is the worst final. Ooh, this is horrendous. There shouldn't be any more after this. And that left me feeling rather curious about what I will think of it. But, to find out what I thought about it, we'll have to go to the tier list. So, The Flames of Hope, the final book of Arc 3. The final mainline book of Wings of Fire. Currently, right now, as of recording this, I would rank The Flames of Hope around
6.5 hours later. Later.
Here, maybe? I am not gonna lie. Even a week after reading this, I am still really undecided about this book. Because I'll fully admit, after leaving this book, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't love it, neither did I dislike it. I just felt nothing. And in my opinion, feeling nothing is possibly the worst thing you could take away from a story. Because if you love a story, if you think it's really good, then great. You can dissect it, you can analyze it, you can read it, and figure out what worked for you, to find out why that fits you, and why you love it so much. But with a book that you don't like, you still get something out of it. You can still analyze it and go, okay, I don't like this, I don't like that. I think that's done rather poorly. Even in a story that you would consider bad, you can still learn from it. But with a story where you don't feel anything, you can't learn anything, you can't dissect it to see why it didn't work, you can't go through it to realize what did work about it, because you feel nothing. After reading this, I didn't feel anything. I was like, ah yes, that was a book. Moving on. However, there are quite a few good things in here, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but there's also quite a few bad things in here. I know, me? Being negative for once? Who would have thought? But now we've had enough dilly-dallying, I think we should dive into the world of Wings of Fire. Just one more time. Okay, so, The Flames of Hope. I'll start off with the negatives, because even though I do believe that I have more negatives than positives, there are so many negatives that I want to save the positives for the end, so we don't end on a bad note. I think one of the major issues with this book is that even though it takes place on Pantala, I think this book is the most disconnected from the arc, disregarding dragonslayer, because even though, yes, physically, the dangerous gift doesn't fit with the rest of the arc, but thematically, it still does, because this whole arc has been dealing with the whole, ooh, fuck the government, ooh, stick it to the big man, to essentially be its core theme, connecting all the stories. You have this in Lost Continent, you have this in the Hive Queen, you have this in the Poison Jungle, and even though the dangerous gift is from the point of view of the big man, well, big woman in Snowfall's case, she realizes how flawed her system is, and changes it. So even though the dangerous gift is from a different point of view for the key topic of the arc, it's still connected to it. But here, in the Flames of Hope, I don't really see any connection to it? I don't know if this is me just being stupid, but I can't think of any way this could connect to the overlying theme. The only thing that comes to mind to me could possibly be Freedom disobeying Cottonmouth, but they've hated each other since the beginning, so not really there because Freedom didn't really listen to him to begin with. But yet again, I am talking about a character literally named Freedom in an arc about achieving freedom. Is he stupid? Yes. The answer is yes. Another issue that I have with this book is Luna. Now, I like Luna. I like her as a character. But, once again, I don't know if this is me just being stupid. Like, I would have to be really stupid if I'm wrong here. But I can't really identify a character arc for her. In every other book, the main character has a very clear, defined character arc. But here, I don't really see one. Like, there are allusions towards multiple possible arcs that she could go through. The smallest of the two is between Luna and Cricket, where Luna still isn't really comfortable with Cricket being Cricket because Cricket is a Hivewing, and due to how Luna has been mistreated by Hivewings her whole life, she doesn't necessarily know how to feel about being quote-unquote friends with Cricket, and how she feels rather hesitant towards Cricket and Blue having a relationship. But that isn't really expanded upon. Like, to my memory, while yes, Luna's thoughts on Cricket does change, we see this at the end of the story where she introduced Cricket to her mothers. I didn't really notice her change throughout the story and realize that, ooh, maybe it is okay with Cricket. But considering how that wasn't really a significant part of the story, I highly doubt that was her main arc. But then that only leaves one big significant thing that could be a potential arc, in which doesn't really feel like a complete character arc to me, is Luna's possible tussle with depression. Because multiple times throughout this book, she does mention, ooh, the dark cloud, the bad day, how it always lurks into the back of her head. Now, that could be a fantastic character arc, but once again, I don't really think it's expanded upon that much. If this mention of the dark cloud, of the bad day, is supposed to be a stand-in for depression, then I think it's done rather poorly, because it only really pays lip service to the subject. Now, this comes down to the fundamental issue with the story, which is that, to me at least, this doesn't really feel like Luna's story. Like, in literally every other Wings of Fire book, it's a character dealing with their own problems, with their own past, and overcoming them. But here, Luna isn't really overcoming her past. Hell, if anything, this isn't Luna's story. It's Freedom's. We go through Freedom's past. We see her go through a significant character arc. We see her sacrifice herself to save the continent. Freedom is the main character. But this story, of course, isn't being told from Freedom's point of view. It's being told through Luna's. Luna is essentially a side character in her own book. And then we move on to what I believe is another core issue with this book, and it's that for the final book of Arc 3, the conclusion to everything that's been set up, it does a rather poor job at it, because 60% of this book just takes place in a room. 60% of this book takes place in the exact same room. Well, physically it does. Bloody heaven sent. But the overwhelming majority of this book is explaining the backstory of Cottonmouth, who is the surprise twist villain of the arc. Although, I will say, I prefer Cottonmouth over the other mind. I prefer there being a actual motivation, a source of hatred, fueling this path of carnage upon the continent of Pantala. I prefer the other mind being Cottonmouth over just being a plant. But due to him being a last-minute twist, the majority of this book is spent explaining his backstory and Freedom's backstory, and showing the exact events of the Scorching. Now, once again, I like this conceptually, but I think it's done rather poorly here, because it's a literal last-minute twist in the final book that doesn't resolve anything that's been set up in the previous books. But you need to have Cottonmouth explain his backstory, so you get his motivation, as well as you understand why Freedom is in the situation that she is. But I don't think it should have taken up the majority of the final book. I think the catalyst for this mistake, quite frankly, is... I'm so sorry to pick on this book, but poor dragonslayer. I'm aware, in my very own video, I said, ooh, I don't really think we should critique this book for just existing. But now I understand why people do. Because even though I didn't mind Dragonslayer, if instead of Dragonslayer, we got a book detailing the Scorching, Cottonmouth's past, Freedom's origin story, we could have had everything be explained there. Now, I do like what happened in the Scorching Inn. I do like how it's written. I like what happened. Well, I don't like that it happened, because I'm personally not a fan of genocide, quite frankly. But I think if the Scorching was this arc's Legends book, then that would solve a overwhelming majority of my problems with this book, because you wouldn't have to explain the entire backstory, because we already had a book dedicated to it. Hell, that's what happened in Arc 2 with Darkstalker. You didn't need to detail his entire backstory in a mainline book, because the whole thing was already explored in his own separate book. It's just like, for the final book of Arc 3, I'm not a big fan of it taking place in one room for the overwhelming majority of the story. And due to this book being preoccupied with explaining the Scorching, there is a lot that gets neglected. Like, pretty much everything that was left open from the previous books just doesn't get concluded. Like, from the Lost Continent, this book never mentions Admiral. None of the Flamesilks are mentioned, and that's so surprising for a book that stars a Flamesilk. And I'll fully admit, this one just breaks my heart. But the open plot threads of the Hive Queen, they do get concluded off-screen. Like, we don't see Cricket reunite with her mother, Katie did, and tell her that, ooh, I know I'm your daughter. Who dares phone me while I record? We don't get to see Cricket free her father. Hell, we don't even get to see Cricket meet her father. Rather, it's just explained that, ooh, they did this off-screen. Like, oh, I wanted to see that. I even mentioned this in my video about the Hive Queen, that I was worried about that not being concluded in Cricket's book, because it's Cricket's problem, and we wouldn't be resolving it from Cricket's point of view. And now here we are. I was right. And there's even stuff from the Poison Jungle that doesn't get resolved, like Belladonna never confronts Sundew about her dating Willow. We never see Belladonna talk to Sundew about Sundew directly disobeying her, about having a romantic relationship outside of her arranged marriage. That's just never mentioned. Like, this book either doesn't conclude things left open from the previous books, or does conclude them, but does it rather poorly. And then there's the real disappointment for me, which is Queen Wasp. Now, I mentioned of the first 3 books of this arc, I said I really like Wasp. I like her as a villain. I like how in the first 2, she always feels omnipresent. And even in the Poison Jungle, where you are outside of Queen Wasp's reach, you still feel the ever-building dread of her approaching. And in this book, for the first time, we have an active conversation with Queen Wasp, kinda in person. And it's her only appearance. She was once the major villain of the first 3 books. And in the final book, she gets reduced to 1 single chapter. While yes, we do see her talk through dragons throughout the story, but we only physically encounter her once. And at the end of the day, she just gets tossed in jail? Like, yeah, I understand the conclusion of that. I understand why that happened. And to be honest, I'm kinda happy that she didn't die. So in the future, she could possibly return and actually have a good ending? But god man, there was a time where I believed Queen Wasp could have become my favourite villain in the entire series. I personally thought she was fantastic in the first 3 books, and it's very disappointing to me to see her be reduced to 1 single chapter. But even if Queen Wasp has been a puppet this whole time, that is still a extremely manipulative, corrupt, dangerous puppet. And she just gets acid spat in her face. Okay, so, moving on to the positives. Finally, there were 5 solid chapters in here where I was like, ooh, this is actually pretty good. And that was after the group met what remains of the chrysalis and the dragons that are free. All the way down to Luna being trapped in Cottonmouth's flashback. There were 5 extremely solid chapters there where I was like, ooh, okay, I'm digging this. Perhaps this book isn't that bad. Like the description of Luna and Cricket walking through the tunnel with the cave drawings around them depicting the scorching from the humans' point of view. I found that legitimately horrifying. Wow, I can't believe I was scared by drawings in a book. This one kind of connects to what I was talking about earlier, even though I have a big problem with the majority of this book essentially just being expository dialogue explaining the scorching. I still like the scorching. I still liked seeing it. I liked seeing it be explained as to how humans lost control over the continent of Pyria. It all comes down to humanity's greed. It always does. Due to one human kingdom stealing dragon eggs, another human kingdom steals dragon eggs, and because they stole dragon eggs, another one does it, and so on and so forth, until every single kingdom on the continent is stealing dragon eggs, essentially causing an entire trend where every single kingdom is trying to get their own dragons. And little do they know that dragons are extremely intelligent, and because of humans stealing the eggs, the parents of the eggs that were stolen burned the entire continent to the ground. Alright, so I better move on to the characters, because as I sit here thinking about more positive things to say, I can only think of more negatives. Okay, so as for the new characters in this book, there are actually quite a few. Like, we have 3 new human characters. Well, I call them characters, but they aren't really that important. There's Raven and Mole, who are the POVs of the prologue. They were fine. And then there's Axolotl, the first non-binary character in the series. I'll fully admit I don't have that much to say about them, especially since we don't understand them for pretty much the entirety of the book. But I did find them funny whenever they were trying to speak dragon and they just spoke complete nonsense. There's Dusky, who essentially becomes Luna's adopted son for the majority of the book. I don't have that much to say about him. Then there's, of course, Cottonmouth, the twist villain of this arc. God, what a vile piece of work he is. Then there's, of course, pretty much the main character of this book. Ugh, poor little Freedom. Somebody who's been manipulated their entire life to believe that they were supposed to be a monster, and that there wasn't more to life outside of violence. But hey, at least she no longer has to live with somebody else being inside their head. I know, I would rather die too. And then there's the 2 new characters in the main group, Pineapple and Bullfrog. Pineapple is the Rainwing that Glory sends along to go to Pantala. And I liked him. I thought it was really sweet to see his relationship with Jambu, and see what Luna thinks of that, where Jambu also does discuss him being a Rainwing in a forest full of Nightwings that he didn't particularly like at first, due to the Nightwings being rather antagonistic towards them, we'll say.
Today's subject, slavery.
And as for Bullfrog, I did like him, but he does feel rather empty compared to the rest of the characters. And that does disappoint me a bit more because I kind of have to talk about this. But at least to my memory, Bullfrog is confirmed to be the first canonically autistic character in Wings of Fire. I find it incredibly disappointing that he gets sidelined the most. He is this really big, tough guy with a rather deep, unexpressive voice, and he doesn't really understand a lot of humor, and a lot of figure of speech really does fly over his head. Hold on. I'm fairly certain I'm just describing me at this point. I don't know. Just in a book where most of the side characters at least get something, it is a bit disappointing to see Bullfrog be the side character that gets sidelined the most. So, those were my thoughts on the Flames of Hope. Damn! I really was really negative here. Like, I spent most of the time talking about the negatives. But hey, that's how I felt. But even after saying all those negative things, I still don't hate it. I don't have this burning hatred in my mind for this book. But neither do I have this whimsical sense of joy. I feel nothing about this book. And this is easily my least favourite climactic book from Wings of Fire. But here, in the Flames of Hope, in my eyes, it fails as a conclusion for Arc 3. It fails thematically, and it fails with resolving open plot threads. I understand why some people are hesitant of a Arc 4 after this. A lot of people had to wait a long time for this book, but I don't loathe it as much as some people do, because I didn't have to wait for it. And I was aware it was rather controversial going into it. But I am happy that we are getting more after this. So A, I can actually be present while a arc is releasing. And also because I know Tui can do better than this. I've seen her do better than this, Hell, the last book I read from her was a certified banger. I'm just very interested to take a step back for a while, look at this arc, and try and figure out what the hell happened. And as for the art that I drew in this video, of course, I drew Luna, and I like how she came out. Is she rather generic? Yes. And I won't lie, I struggled with the colours a lot. Like, I think colour blending wise, she is nowhere near as good as the job that I did on Blue. Hell, at first, I did plan to do something rather more complicated. But then I was like, this is the last one that we're doing. Why don't we finish the way we started? With something rather simple. And right now, I just want to pull up my first ever picture on this channel. Yes, that thing. I drew that when I first started this. Just look at it. Just look at the comparison between these two. I don't want to boost my own ego and go, ooh, look how good I've become, because I've still got a lot to improve upon. But what I want you, yes, you at home, to take away from this, art in general, writing, drawing, acting, it isn't built into you. Art is like a muscle. The more you use the muscle, the more you train, the better you get. The stronger you get, the better at art you get. Trust me, if you want to do something, at least try. Because you won't know if you succeed if you never try. If you want to do something, if you want to draw, if you want to write, do it. And as usual, as for next week, oh, there isn't a next week. This is the last one. Shh, ignore those! Ignore those! I was originally going to sit here and give a broad speech saying thank you and explaining my thoughts going into this channel and how those thoughts have changed over time. But my throat is so tired. It is getting extremely late. And I need to end this. So I'll save that for another day. But what I will say is thank you for watching. Sincerely. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for watching me ramble about this book series for ages. I don't know the exact runtime of every single video, but I know it's far too long. And with this coming to an end, I will say that I won't be back next week. I will be trying some new stuff, for real this time. I'm not gonna ditch out like all the other times that I've said I'm gonna do new stuff. I really am excited to do something new. And I hope you lot will continue to watch as I further explore the world of Wings of Fire. So, at this moment, that's really all I have to say. So, thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you another day.